All right, Kyler, let's take a look by going ahead. There's my words. Let's take a look by going ahead and whatever words. MLA format. That's what I'm going to look at first. This is good. I don't think this may have been the original due date, so that's fine. Page numbers looks good, no spacing issues. And I want to say I do really like your title, The New Age of Anxiety and Depression. Just that simple kind of italicized version of it adds emphasis to this is just a new age of it. I think you did a good job of emphasizing it. What you did a lot better than others is you have in-text citations. You do not need the year for them, but other than that, it is okay. And you do a good job at listing sources. This is all in alphabetical order. The only thing I would say is, even if the link doesn't work correctly, you should still have tried to have something like this indented. And all you need to do at this point is hit backspace, enter, and tab, because that will allow it to be its own line. So I see that a few times where you should probably add the indenting there, but other than that, this looks pretty good. I will say I don't know what it will be like in AP Lang, and teachers and professors are always different with this, but for this one, this is from the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. Sometimes with these sources by legitimate organizations, they may be considered the author. For me, it's always been a personal call if you want the article title or if you want the organization to be the author. I usually err on I'm going to have the organization be first, but I've had teachers and professors who don't care either way, so I'm not going to care either way because you're referencing and that's all that matters. So, as we start with your intro, you have a really, really good intro set up, which does not surprise me at all. You have a good intro of short, quick sentences to get the reader involved, which is good. And you do a good job here where people have kind of been struggling, where you do it successfully is, and we'll talk about it when we get there, but your family and friend connections, you did a really good job of using evidence and research to back yourself up, which I haven't seen. And honestly, the trick with these things is you can oftentimes build up this info in the introduction and get away with it not being as fleshed out in your body. But you did a good job at both, so I'm not mad about it. And then, excuse me. I think this is really good. I don't remember from looking at your paper just a few minutes ago if you talked about stress being prevalent, but I'll get back to that, and I'm going to mark that on your rubric so I do not forget it. Okay, so let's move on. Kyler, you've got a really good topic sentence here. People have distanced themselves from family and friends. You do a really good job of tying in this evidence and research with it. So we lose time spending time with other people, and you move on to a bad impression with it because the disconnect has been negative. And then you have twang a little bit. The increased social media use was linked to higher depression rates, and that's when people took whatever they feel happier. So I think this is really good things that shows that the prevalence of us being on our phone really establishes this disconnect, and we lose that happiness. What I may say you want to emphasize more is how it's related to anxiety and depression, and maybe some symptoms that have it, but maybe if you have it up here, because I know isolation is one in particular, and I think that's kind of what we're getting, a general sense of dissatisfaction. I think you can maybe incorporate something here up there about how this is specifically related to anxiety and depression, but you have a little bit more here because you have better expression of emotions, better skills, and people lose a healthy way to show it. So I think these are really good paragraphs. I think the only thing lacking a little bit is how it specifically relates to anxiety and depression. And that's really the only thing you're missing. But these are absolutely true, and it's backed by so much research, so that is good that you have. As we move on to your next topic sentence, they don't pursue their passions because many feel they don't have meaning. So this is a really, really intriguing aspect for me personally. And I haven't seen anyone really talk about this quite yet. I've seen a few things about jobs and whatnot, but you're the first one to talk about passion so far, which is interesting. I am personally okay with this. I think you could probably get away with Mel Schwartz LCSW because that kind of acronym, even though it's not as common, it's kind of important to her title. So I don't know if you need it, but it's fine if you do. And I think, having this evidence is good that you have it here. You just don't need the year there. And also, because you already have Schwartz's name, you technically don't need the in-text citation. Wait. Okay, there we go. Schwartz. I looked at the Sussex and I thought that was a citation by itself. So, as I lose track of where I am in your paper, I think this is pretty good. And then we leave off here, increased anxiety because of how demanding and pressuring they are. And then the demands of it. So you do a really good job of transitions there. And you've done a good job of bouncing back and forth between ideas. And then when we get to this paragraph, I think you still continue the research. And it is pretty good. The only thing I would challenge you on is you have often what the world has to offer, though, is not what should truly be sought after. I think you need to explain this a little bit more because I'm not really too sure what people are looking for in the world. There's a little bit of confusion there. You want to be clear there. Like, if they're not looking for their passion, what is it that they're looking for in the world that the world has to offer? Be specific with what you mean here, because we got into a little bit of the opinionated, hypothetical, kind of opinion-based thing without the proper evidence or research with it. But I do really like that you, personally, I like that you tie in the Langston Hughes poem, and then the quick explanation is good. People begin to seek after worldly standards that leave them filled with confusion, depression, anxiety, fear, and hopelessness. So this isn't too bad. I would just explain what these worldly standards or what they're looking for is a little bit more to add context to it. And then right here, because you're quoting a poem, you do need a quotation marks. And here's the tricky thing, and I'm not going to mark you down for it, but if I type in A Dream Deferred, Langston Hughes, let me pull it up in a PDF. So there's different versions of how to do this. Come on. Let's work, computer. Wait. Did you say A Dream Deferred? Also called Harlem. It dies out, it explodes. Okay. Never mind. I take back what I said. That's my fault. That's not a direct quote, so you don't need to do anything in particular. So we're good with that. So because you paraphrased it, never mind. I just didn't realize you were paraphrasing it. That just seemed like it was correct. So anyways, that's pretty good. That's the thing that needs to be explained in there is what are those worldly standards for what it is. So as we move on content-wise, anxiety and depression are also much more prevalent now because in adolescence than before. You don't need that word because they are not as self-sufficient. So this is a really interesting topic. Now, the World War II stuff and Cold War, you technically do not need a citation for that. However, this is what I'm a little thrown off by. Many had to learn how to be self-sufficient because of communism and had to learn going without basic necessities. So I obviously see the connection with World War II. But the problem with the communism and the Cold War is I will be honest with you. I'm not 100% sure about how things had to be rationed with communism affecting, I'm thinking about people put on blacklists and people who lost their jobs and because of the Red Scare, the Lavender Scare, all sorts of things that happen. Excuse me. But I think maybe this one needs some more context to what it is. And I think part of the reason maybe I'm throwing off is because World War II versus the Cold War had some very different things going on, where like what's going through my head, and this is hard as a history major, is the Cold War seems to be more economic based, where World War II is economic based, but there were other reasons that they had a ration. But I think this is a good start where you're like, okay, there are times, especially for people who are still in our society today, where they had a ration, but then you transition into Tim Newman, who talks about how we're more sensitive because everything's abundant. I think that's really interesting. And this is actually something that came up in a recent conversation I was having with some history teachers, and I think it's a really good quote, and you did a really good job of setting this up. We don't have a focus to survive, and I just think this is a really neat kind of paragraph because it's something that I wouldn't have imagined being in this kind of paper, but I think you're absolutely right, and this is a really good job of using evidence and research to prove a point that we don't think about. So, as we move on there, before we get there. More people are becoming aware of feelings, blah, blah, blah. I think the only thing, again, that we could add is maybe be a little bit more specific because we don't have the survival. We are paying attention to this. You kind of have it. I'd be a little bit more explicit with it. And then you talk about changes in the adolescent brain, and this information is all correct. However, the only thing I might challenge you with is almost kind of what you're saying is that because we have recent research, anxiety, depression is worse because now we see what it's like. But the thing is, I don't think the article is explicitly stating that. And you've got a spacing issue right here, Kyler. I don't think the article that you're mentioning specifically is saying this is a new development and that it's new. I don't know. It's a tough call and it's hard to do, but it does talk about brain development, but I don't know if that's specifically saying that this is how the brain has worked recently. So I think what you are better off doing is finding some research about brain development as it was in the past to see if they found anything. I think it's a new development, and maybe this would have been a segue, is it's increased because, we find out how the brain works, and here are some reasons why it changes as well, is we're in a vulnerable state. I think maybe if you left it with a vulnerable state, it would be good. And then we get to the end of your paper, and I think you have a really solid understanding of the topic, and you have a really good conclusion right here, and everything is pretty good. So overall, what I would say, Kyler, is you have a few moments where I think your research or evidence needs to be a little bit more explicitly laid out. You do have a few typos, but your language and style is really, really good. And then the only thing I would take back to your thesis is I don't know how much you talked about confidence or stress. So I think, and if I look through here, I don't really see stress or maybe a little bit of confidence, but because you have that, I would go back and tweak your thesis as well. But other than that, pretty good paper. I just think you need to tweak a few things here and there. All right.